Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today is a very exciting video. It is probably the most looked forward to video of the year. I love watching these. And this is the finale of Vlogmas. I am so proud of myself for posting 25 videos in 25 days. Like, I am so amazed that I did that. It was a ton of work, but I feel like it was such an accomplishment. So I will link the entire Vlogmas playlist up above and down below so you can watch all 25 videos. Please do. I really put a lot of work into them. But today we're going to be getting into my top 22 books of 2022. I read about 210 books this year, and these are going to be the 22 best ones. These are all unranked. There's no order to them at all, except for my top three. Those are my three favorite of all of the rest of the books. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into my best books of 2022. Let's start with something that I had expected to be a 5-star because of all the hype it got. But even then, even with my expectations set so high, it still blew me away. And that is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. I absolutely love this book. People pitched it to me as this like super fast-paced thrill ride, kind of like No Exit, where it picks you up and you just do not get off. You need to finish it. And that's exactly what happened with me. And this book, I read it during a 24-hour readathon, and it just like zoom, like kicked my reading into high gear. I read it when I was starting to get tired, and it woke me right up. And I still remember every single scene of this book, even though I was delirious while I was reading it. Razorblade Tears follows two dads, and both of their sons were married. They were in a relationship, and both dads had some kind of reservation or homophobia towards their son that prevented them from having a full, close relationship. And tragedy strikes when both of their sons are killed in an act that seems like it was driven by hate for who they are as people. One of the dads is white and one of the dads is black, and the white guy is really racist, and the black guy always has to kind of correct him and teach him that things are not as he is saying. And of course, they're both kind of stumbling their way along, trying to overcome the internalized homophobia. So it has really strong commentary on racism, homophobia, all of these things that have just become so insidious in our culture and so like hotly contested. But this book does not treat these issues as if it's a witch hunt, which I feel like a lot of people nowadays kind of treat that as, but rather with a lot of empathy and understanding for who these people are. Even though this book has really uncomfortable moments with almost every single character, you have such empathy for every single person, and these characters really do feel like real people. As these two dads are teaming up to solve the murders of their sons and fight for the sons that they never really got a chance to build a genuine relationship with, there is so much action, so much excitement. It feels like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Like, that is the best way I can describe it. It literally feels like Pulp Fiction. Like, it's crazy. It is off the charts action. I feel like if you have a non-reader in your life and you're trying to slowly encourage them to pick up books, I think if you get them the audio for this, they will be in, especially if it's like a straight man. And I know it's weird that I'm recommending a book about avenging two gay people for a straight man, but I feel like this is the anti-reader straight man gateway book into reading. It has so much thrill. The fast pace is just simply off the charts. It is unmatchable with any other book. And at the same time, it's emotional. It has so much heart. I was literally sobbing at the end. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's the perfect balance in a thriller of fun and emotion. Next, let's talk about one of my first reads of 2022, and that was Good Rich People by Eliza Jane Brazier. I remember reading this back in January or February and thinking, yeah, I just know 11 months from now, this is gonna be on my mind. I'm not gonna forget about her. She's gonna be in my favorites of the year. And I was right. I absolutely loved this campy little thriller. We are following a super, super wealthy family who uses their guest house as a place to play a little rich person's game. They let a lower class person live in their guest house for really, really, really cheap. But what that person doesn't know is this isn't just charity from rich people. No, this family is playing a game in which they're trying to ruin this person's life. And whoever can ruin their life wins the game. It is so fucked up. It is so crazy. There is such extreme levels of rich people drama. Like, obviously this would never happen in real life, but it was so interesting to read about. It also has a great commentary on class and has very strong eat the rich vibes. Y'all know I love a thriller that's fun and juicy, but also has something to say, and that is exactly what I got from this book. The end is also really haunting and like gets a little bit deep, a little bit speculative. Not speculative as in like otherworldly, but speculative as in like it really makes you think, and it's not 100% cut and dry. Maybe that's not the right word for that, but I loved it either way. Let's get into a romance and talk about The Roughest Draft. Oh my gosh, I saw so many people hating this book this year. I cannot get enough of it. I started reading this in a coffee shop, just thinking it would be a little fluffy read to pass the time, and I was sucked in immediately. I kept going to table to table to table, asking people if they had a highlighter because I wanted to highlight so many passages in this book. It is just beautifully, beautifully written. And for a fluffy contemporary romance, you wouldn't think that you would get such gorgeous writing. The passages that I wanted to highlight were not like, "You're my everything," he said. "I know," she said. Like, no. These things were descriptive and beautiful. I'm just obsessed. This follows two authors who collaborated on a book together that was wildly, wildly successful. And then they had a falling out and never spoke again, never collaborated again. The issue is they still have a contract with their publisher that says they have to write another book together. So they come back together to write this book at this vacation home, I think in Florida. Yes, it's a tiny Florida town, and the atmosphere is so fun. Very cutesy vacation vibes. And as they come together, they kind of hash out their previous fight and end up coming back together and facing the thing that caused the fight to begin with. And at the same time, they're writing this romance book together, and they write it separately and then pass the pages under their door because obviously they're like fighting, there's tension, but each one is kind of basing their pages off where the relationship is like in real life. So they're communicating with each other their true feelings through these pages of a romance novel. It is so adorable and emotional. There is such tension in this book. It's definitely a slow burn, but not super slow. Like, there's definitely things that happen leading up to the big like confessional I love you moment. And I'm absolutely obsessed with this book, but the caveat is I don't have any issue with cheating in my books. I can read about cheating all day long. It really doesn't bother me. I can conceptualize that it's a book, and obviously characters in books are going to be morally gray. Nobody's actually in real life getting hurt by this. But I know a lot of people did not like the cheating in this book because both of these authors have partners at home while they're in Florida writing this book. Just to let you know, in case that bothers you, you probably don't want to read this. Next up, let's talk about Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. I am so happy this book exists. We are following a family who is struggling with their 17-year-old son when they find out he has pedophilic disorder and he's been trying to find a way to manage it. I'll just put it that way. Obviously, there are very, very few ethical ways of managing this disorder. So it causes a huge rift in the family, and every single person, mom, dad, and son, have their own way of thinking about it, grieving it, and coping with it. I absolutely love the mental health representation in this book. It is so visceral and emotional. It is heartbreaking, and it's something that I think not a lot of people understand. I, in grad school, had to write one of my dissertations on pedophilic disorder. Each person in my program got randomly assigned a disorder from the DSM, and mine was pedophilic disorder, and my professors were like, you know what? Sorry, you gotta do it. So it was really difficult for me to research this disorder and have empathy for the people who have it, because obviously a lot of people who struggle with this disorder, it's very difficult to find empathy for them, and most people do not manage it in an ethical and legal way. But there are people out there who do, and for the people who don't enjoy having this disorder, it is a really, really tough life, and this isn't representation that I've seen anywhere. The things that this book discusses, I haven't heard any conversations about this anywhere outside of my master's program in therapy school. And the fact that this is out here as like popular fiction that a lot of people are reading just makes me so happy that other people not in a master's program for therapy can access empathy for an extremely nuanced and flawed main character. This book is written with so much warmth and understanding, while also viscerally feeling the darkness of what is taking place. And it has so much mental health commentary. I highly recommend this book if you think you can handle reading about a subject matter that can be really upsetting, and even more upsetting if you find yourself accessing empathy for this person. Shall we talk about one that everyone is going to drag me for? Sure, why not? Let's go ahead and just get into it. The House Across the Lake by Hailey. I know what you're all thinking. Hailey, nobody liked this book. Why did you like this book so much? There is just something about Hailey Sager's writing style that sucks me in, and this book was just a ton of fun. In my humble opinion, I think Hailey Sager gets judged a little too harshly. People hold him to this standard of like writing the best thriller of the year every single release he comes out with, and for me, it's never been that. It's just been fun. And to me, when I look at all the books I've read this year, this is one of the most fun reading experience that I had. And for me, that means something. Like this book, I'm not just gonna throw into the corner and not mention just because it was fun and didn't have anything to say. Sometimes we need a fun moment. And I loved the weird turn this book took about halfway through. Like, I love weirdness. Y'all know that. I read weird speculative horror all the time. So why is that going to stop me from enjoying a thriller? It's not. In this book, we are following a former celebrity. Like, she was in the public eye for a long time. Either she was an actress or something. And then she ended up falling into addiction after she lost her husband. And so she kind of had this like public mental breakdown, a la like Britney shaving her head or Lindsay Lohan and all of her antics. So her mother sends her away to live at their cabin and recover. But instead of recovering, this grief-stricken, paranoid bitch just stares out her window and spies at the people across the lake who live in this big, beautiful mansion of a cabin with clear walls. Like, it's just like all windows. So she can spy on them and see everything they're doing. And she basically drinks herself to death, okay? The girlie is not in recovery. The girlie is an unreliable narrator with borderline alcoholism. Actually, no, just straight up alcoholism, who's paranoid as fuck watching the people across the street. And the couple across the street is, they're celebrities as well. They're famous people. This is like a very exclusive little cabin lake situation. This isn't just run-of-the-mill cabin. And she starts to freak out one day when she realizes the woman in the famous couple across the way is missing. Or at least she can't find her anywhere in any of those big ass windows. So she starts to get suspicious and do some investigating on her own. It's super fun to follow an alcoholic, unreliable narrator, for me at least. I know it's like a very cliche, like played out trope, but I think That's what Riley Sager was banking on, is just making it so camp and ridiculous and playing on this thing that we've all read from before, like Woman in the Window, Woman in Cabin 10 vibes, and just making it so ridiculous and kind of distracting you with these very mundane, we've seen it before, thriller tropes, and then surprising you at the start of the second act with the craziest twist. I did not see it coming. I would venture to guess no one saw that twist coming. It is speculative, so if you don't like that, you're not gonna like this, but just don't take it seriously. Okay, this is camp. This is fun. Riley Sager knows how to have a good fucking time, and I'm gonna be riding with Riley until the day I die on BookTube. Shall we get into some horror? This was a very recent read for me, and that is Pen Pal by Dathan Auerbach, and this book is shocking from the word go. It kind of has a similar structure to the book Confessions by Kane Minato in the way that it has pretty long chapters, but at the end of each chapter, it leaves you with a twist that is literally so shocking. It will leave you reeling, it will leave your jaw on the floor, and you cannot help but start the next chapter. I read almost all of this in one sitting and filmed it for a Patreon vlog. It was such a fun read, and that's one of my favorite vlogs I've ever filmed because I just had so much fun reading it. I was shook at the end of every chapter. We are following this guy who is going back through the mementos and memories of his life and putting together the childhood trauma that he experienced, but he didn't really realize was going to be traumatic as he was living it. So we're kind of reflecting back on that as an adult, and it just gives you that eerie feeling of being an adult, looking back and knowing that your younger self didn't realize the true intentions of the people around you. Like that uncle that would always force you to give them a kiss. Ugh. But it takes it to an extreme level. And this has twist after twist after twist. It is so shocking. It is so horrifying. It is so dark. If you can't handle really triggering themes, really dark horror, I don't recommend this for you, but if you can, you've got to read Pen Pal. It was so, so good. Taking a hard left into YA, this one is not as dark, but it is just as horrifying, and that is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. After really having trouble getting into White Smoke and DNFing it twice last year, I was so worried that this one wasn't going to match up to my expectations, but I'm happy to report that it did. And I did have quite high expectations because Carrie, the book that this is a modern retelling of, is one of my favorite books of all time. It's one of the horror books that got me into the genre at a really, really young age, and I absolutely love Carrie. The whole story, the musical, the whole shebang. And I feel like this book is better. Like, if we're gonna call one of those books, Carrie or The Weight of Blood, a modern classic, I think it should be The Weight of Blood. It just has so much more to say on the story. The Weight of Blood takes the structure of Carrie and applies it to a mixed girl in high school who has always been white passing, and no one knows that she is half black. Suddenly, one day when people find out, the bullying just gets kicked into high gear. She cannot live a day at school. She's being tormented. She's facing all of this racism that she really never had to deal with before. And she's also rocking her entire identity and perception of herself. There's a scene where she is looking in a mirror and trying out, saying the words, "I am black," and how that resonates for her, never feeling that way, never identifying with half of her lived self and her DNA. It's literally heartbreaking. This book is emotional. It is heart-wrenching. You truly feel for our main character, and you cannot wait for her to go berserk at prom night at the very end. It has so much to say. The horror is gorgeously written. The story unfolds perfectly. I was never bored. I absolutely love this book. I seriously think this is one of my favorite YA books I've ever read, and I can't wait to introduce a child to horror through this book. I just want to stand on a street corner while kids are getting off a bus and be like, "Anyone want to give this a try? Anyone want to give this a try?" I can't imagine having a book like this when I was of YA reading age. This would have changed the game for me, and I'm so happy that these little, what? They're not Gen Z. What are they? Even younger than Gen Zers have this to introduce them to horror. Let's get back into the fun and the camp with the Mindfuck series by S.T. Abbey. I absolutely love these books. This is the first thing that I read in 2022, and it truly made an impact. I binged all 5 books in this series while I had COVID at the very beginning of the year. And it's what single-handedly got me through sitting on the couch and not moving and being in severe pain for like 5 days straight. The Mindfuck series follows a girl who is a serial killer, but she's not just killing random people for any random reason. She is calculated, she is revengeful, and she is picking off every single person who wronged her in this past traumatic experience she had. So right away, we're rooting for her, and it is so entertaining to see a girl go and get her revenge in this gory, strong, almost empowering way. I mean, if you've gone through trauma and it involved another person, I'm sure you've had the moment where you're like, if only I could, you know what I mean? And these books definitely help you live out that fantasy. But it's not just all serial killer revenge. There's also a romance subplot where our main character is falling in love with the FBI agent who's assigned to her case, but obviously he doesn't know that she is the killer that he's looking for. And it's so funny because they're like building this psychological profile in the FBI, and they're like, oh yeah, well, serial killer is usually a white man, da, 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 da. And she's just sitting there like, oh, go off, FBI. It was so fun. It was so entertaining, so over the top. The gore was amazing. The romance and smut was low-key fun. It didn't take away from the thriller plot at all. It's just perfect. It's so much fun. I mean, I know this one is so widely talked about and kind of blew up on the internet this year, but if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. Next up, I'm going to talk about my 4 best horror novellas. Of my top 22 books, literally 4 of them were horror novellas. I have read so many of them this year. I've kind of low-key become addicted to them. So these are the best of the best of the best. Starting with Below by Laurel Hightower. This one really took me by surprise. I am absolutely obsessed with it. It has those snowy, isolated vibes. We're following a woman who is driving to, I believe, like a bachelorette party or something. And she's driving through the night to get to this destination, but she gets stuck in the snow. And a nice trucker man offers to help her and drive with her and make sure that she gets there safely. But then something treacherous happens to him on the road, and she has to decide if she's going to abandon the nice stranger that was willing to help her, or maybe risk her life going to help him back. And obviously this is a speculative story. It involves Mothman, as you can tell by the cover. If you like the Mothman legend, you will love this. But you have to enjoy some ambiguity and some kind of weirdness in your horror to get on board with this. I absolutely love that stuff, so it was perfect for me. It was super fast-paced. The action was at a 10 all the time, and I just loved it. It was perfect. The next one I have is a super short horror anthology called They Were Here Before Us by Eric LaRocca. Eric kindly sent me this copy early, so thank you so much to him, and thank you for always sending me your books for review, because I don't think I have not liked any of them, but this one is by far my favorite, not only because I love the stories and the commentary in here, but I mean, look at this fucking book. And it has gorgeous illustrations throughout, hello. Imagine you're reading and you just get to this, it's giving. There are a few stories in here, but they all relate around this central theme that they were here before us. They meaning natures, animals, wildlife, bugs. They were all on this planet claiming it before we were. And it's stories of nature's revenge in a way, kind of them taking it back. And a lot of stories are from nature's perspective. It really just explores where the human and wildlife worlds meet, how we intertwine, how we support each other, hurt each other, etc., etc., told through these beautiful but gross horror stories. I just think this book is so perfect and so underrated. I feel like no one is talking about this, and everyone needs to be talking about this. If this even remotely sounds like something that you will like, please order it. I promise it will measure up to your expectations, because I can't even accurately describe this with enough praise. Like, it is seriously so good. I am jealous of the fact that I did not come up with this concept and rate this. Like, so talented, so gorgeous, so obsessed. Next up, we have another read from the first month or so of the year. I just really kicked off 2022 with some bangers. Maybe that's why I was in a slump the past 3 months, because nothing could match up to the reading I did at the beginning of 2022. But one of my first books that I read this year was We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III, and I have not shut up about it ever since. I believe at my halfway point, the mid-year book freakout tag, I had named this as my favorite book of the year, and it was until it got dethroned by a few books in the latter half of the year, but I absolutely loved this one. We are following a family who are trapped in their bathroom because they got this tornado alert. They had to hunker down and shelter in place so this tornado didn't get them. They all go into the bathroom, and when they try to emerge the next morning after the storm, they find that they're stuck because a tree fell on their house and prevents them from opening the door and escaping. Throughout their time stuck in here, though, they start to think, maybe it's better that we're stuck in here and no one can get to us because there is some crazy shit happening outside the door. I'm talking post-apocalyptic crazy. Again, this is a horror story with a lot of speculative, a lot of weird, a lot of ambiguity, but that's what I like, so I'm obsessed. There's also a queer main character in here who is just this angsty, edgy teen who is like, ugh, I just want to get out of here and talk to my girlfriend, my witchy little hot little girlfriend. Ugh, I hate it here. Where's my eyeliner? And that was just very, I don't know, good for me. I just love characters like that. It reminds me of me as a child, and I just could not love this book anymore. A lot of people hate the movie adaptation. Not me. Unpopular opinion. I loved it. And y'all can probably guess the last novella that I have to tell you about, because it's another one that I cannot seem to shut up about, and that is One Bloody Thing After Another by Joey Como. In this book, we're following a weird, quirky menagerie of characters as they get into horrifying acts. Our main character, though, is a girl who is horrified to find that she has feelings for her female best friend. So she's trying to parse through all of this stuff that's coming up, her identity, what this means for her, and the emotional turmoil that she's in comes out through this metaphor of gore and blood and guts, and I just love that so much. This book is so weird. Again, so ambiguous, but so darkly funny, charming, and emotional that I could not put it down. I've raved about this book so much, so I won't spend a super long amount of time in this video. I'm sure you knew it was going to be here, but seriously, if you like weird queer horror like I do, you're gonna love it. Let's talk about the one singular nonfiction book that made it onto this list, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I know this one is not a surprise, and you've probably heard about it from a million people's best of the year list. It is truly one of the best books of this year. I think this is one that's going to be read for years and years and years. It was an instant classic. You can really tell when a celebrity memoir is written with genuineness and depth, and that person is actually a talented writer, and I'm happy that this is all the case for I'm Glad My Mom Died. Jeanette talks about her abusive upbringing and her struggles with an eating disorder, the fraught relationship with her mother, and the struggles that she had supporting her family growing up as a child actor. It was heartbreaking. You could feel every single emotion through the pages, and it was so interesting to go back and hear about someone who I looked up to and was jealous of and was like, oh my God, this girl has a perfect life. Like, she's blonde, she's skinny, she's a famous actress, she's rich, like what could possibly be wrong with her? To go back and read what she was going through when I was a child thinking those thoughts just really puts a lot in perspective. And there is gorgeous mental health representation in here. Obviously, it's her very real lived experience of going through abuse, developmental trauma, and struggling with an eating disorder. So because it is very accurate, very real, very heartbreaking, do take those trigger warnings into consideration. But if you feel that you can handle it, this is a gorgeous memoir. Jumping back into YA, very surprised that there is more than one. There's actually 3 YA books on this list. We have Family of Liars by E. Lockhart. Now, this is a very nostalgic read for me. We Were Liars was my favorite book of all time for years and years and years and years in high school. It like very much contributed to my development as a person. It's one of those books that just like shaped who I was. I read it over and over and over, and I highlighted so much of it with cringy teenage angst commentary in the margins. And this is, of course, the prequel that follows the older generation of the family that we follow in We Were Liars. It is this rich, bougie family that is full of secrets and lies, and we just get to peek into their family dynamic. And in this book, we see how the mom in the last book's story really closely mirrored the story of her daughter. There was great representation for generational trauma, and it just follows these very real emotions. And obviously, E. Lockhart's writing style is very unique. A lot of people don't like it. I do. This is just kind of an example of what you're going to get into with an E. Lockhart book. Very, very, very short chapters, literally in the same like page right here, and very interesting writing. It's kind of broken down almost like poetry sometimes in the way that it says, lightheaded and his lips taste like orange cake and he needs a shave. He's tall and he bends down to reach me. Like all of these paragraphs, this is kind of how the majority of the book is written. And for me, I think it makes it very atmospheric, very emotional. It adds a layer to the story where you're not just like reading lines of text, but a lot of people don't like it. So consider that before going in. But I think if you're a fan of We Were Liars, especially to the visceral point that I am, then you will love this book. And the other YA book that made it onto my best of list is The Mary Shelley Club by Goldie Moldavsky. And I actually had the chance to meet her. She's a wonderful person, and she signed a little scrap of another book that I had with me because I did not have my book with me. But I cannot wait to take this in here because I literally have a message from Miss Goldie herself. And she was a very sweet, very wonderful person. I had a great experience meeting her. You can just tell that she went through a similar upbringing that I did. And that is just like being the outsider perspective, being the, not to sound cringe, but like not like other girls girl, like the weirdo who watches horror movies instead of Gossip Girl and Pretty Little Liars and has no idea what anyone else is talking about at the cafeteria. Yeah, that is kind of the main character that we follow, and that was me as a child. So this was a very nostalgic read and quickly became a favorite of mine for that reason. I just felt like my young self, my inner child, was healed reading this story about someone very, very similar to how I was growing up. We're following a girl who is new to town, and she moved after this tragedy happened at the old place where she lived. She had this like break-in armed robber situation, which is obviously like home invasions for me are one of my top biggest fears. So it was traumatizing for her, and she keeps having flashbacks of it, worrying that it's going to happen again. But for her, the way that she copes with this very real fear is to take in this like fun, fake fear of horror movies. And she's obsessed with horror. If you are a horror obsessed teen, you're really going to connect with this one. She just like wakes up every day in a PTSD nightmare, goes to the couch and starts a horror movie. And her mom's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Are you okay? And she's like, this is how I cope. Nobody understands me, the angst. Until she finds a club at her school called the Mary Shelley Club that is all full of horror-obsessed geeks like her, but nobody knows that each person is in the club. It's kind of like secret society vibes. And oh my God, sorry, Chihuahua is knocking over my tripod, hold on. And there are people from every single clique in this club. So it's like not just like one type of person. And the way that they all come together is kind of giving Breakfast Club energy. And they all get together and do these fear tests and watch horror movies. So that's how they bond with each other. And she thinks that she has found a little friend group, but things get dark and these fear tests reach a level that is not what she signed up for. I'll just leave it at that, but know that it has a lot of heart. It's very nostalgic if you're like how I was growing up, at least. And it has a surprising level of horror in it as well. The twist, the gore, it all came through. Diving back into romance, we have Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. This was my favorite summer romance. Easily. I sobbed reading this book multiple times. The emotions run super high as we're following this dual timeline romance. One is with our two main characters growing up and falling in love and being in this cute little young love relationship that is all leading up to this big fight. And then the other alternating chapters are as they are adults reconnecting over this big grief, this death that happened around them that kind of brought them back together. And they're having to rehash these old issues, but they're also remembering the love that they had for each other when they were so young and innocent. The emotions just feel so real. These characters feel so real. It's another slow burn that really builds that tension. If you like that in a romance, you're gonna love this. It has that perfect summer atmosphere. Honestly, the atmosphere really reminded me of We Were Liars meets The Summer I Turned Pretty, but for an adult audience. So if you liked those books growing up, you will love this one as an adult. And taking a hard left back into horror, we have Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. This follows a girl who is like one of those serial killer groupies. Like, she has a little pen pal situation with this infamous serial killer who's on death row. And she's like delusional about it. She's like, oh my God, we're besties. He's in love with me, slay. When in reality, like, he's just manipulating her, and we all know that as the audience. But he convinces her to go run this errand for him, since obviously he's stuck in jail and can't do it himself. And she has to go see the Riverman and do this task for this man. So she goes on this quest to do the task, and we follow her along the way. Things get weird, things get speculative. Of course, that's the type of horror that I love, so that's the type of horror that's going to be on my best of the year list. It is gory, it is intense, it is psychologically disturbing, and that's all I'm going to say about that, because I really feel like you need to go in blind. Like, you have to go in blind. Just know you're going to get your socks knocked right off, because I was not expecting the level of like psychological horror in here. It really took me by surprise. But again, there's also speculative horror and like body horror gore. So it really has it all. And this was an instant 5-star. Like, I knew at probably the 30% mark, I'm like, oh yeah, favorite of the year. Easily. It was such a fun ride. I read this on sprints for Hailey, and I literally kept wanting to sprint. I did not want to like have the talking in between, because I'm like, I want to read this book so bad. Another romance on my list is actually a duet, and that is There Are No Saints and There Is No Devil by Sophie Lark. These are both pretty short, little dark romance books, and they go together, so I'm just counting them as one book on this list. This is a serial killer romance that takes place on the art scene in San Francisco? Either San Francisco or Seattle, one of those northern S cities. And these two serial killers find each other in the city, and they're also famous artists. So they're in this constant competition in the public eye, like who can make the better art piece. But behind the scenes, they have a killer competition as well. Who can kill the most people? And one guy has an MO that's just like very typical of a straight white serial killer man, which is like killing women because he has mommy issues. But the other guy is more nuanced, okay? He only kills people who deserve it, like people who suck and probably should be murdered in his eyes. So you can kind of have some empathy for him. And he ends up stumbling across one of the other guy's victims, and she strikes up a relationship with him. He kind of takes her under his wing, not only as an artist, but also as a serial killer protege. And they go through this whole dramatic sequence. There's murder, there's sex, there's love, there's camp vibes, there's gore. There is everything. Like, this is everything I love all in one. And it's on Kindle Unlimited. And it is one of the most immersive reading experiences I've ever had, because there's actually a playlist that goes along with each book, and it tells you when to play certain songs. And I kid you not, when you play the song and you're reading at the same time, it's like a movie unraveling in your mind. It's so visual. It is one of the best reading experiences. Like, I cannot emphasize how much I love this book enough. And this was also one of my first reads of the year. Like, I just had a killer couple reading months to start off the year, and these books really stuck with me. I really want to read There Are No Saints and There Is No Devil. I actually just ordered the new like snake cover paperbacks, which I probably have on the screen. The other covers were really ugly, and I'm passing them around to all my friends because I'm like, y'all all need to read this. Once they're all done, I'm gonna reread them because I'm simply obsessed with them. This last book I'm gonna get into before my top 3, so this is the last one kind of in the general category, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This one was another one that I read in the first couple of months of the year that just stuck with me so much. I feel like this made such an impact all across BookTube, BookTok, Bookstagram, all the book places. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, but this is originally a Kylo Ren and Rey fanfiction put in the STEM world, like academia. And basically this cute little grad student who's supposed to be Rey falls in love with her like begrudging, arrogant, tall professor who is Dr. Adam Carlson, aka Kylo Ren, aka Adam Driver. And they have this little fake dating, mutually beneficial, enemies to lovers romance. I'm not gonna lie, this is very, very tropey. But for me, I am a simple-minded girl. And sometimes when I'm reading romance, I just like to eat up all the tropes. But it also doesn't hurt when a book has some emotion in it, and I definitely felt that as well while reading this one. The smut was also really good. I'll just leave it at that. Chapter 16, you'll let everybody know. It was adorable, it was hot, it was fun, I cried, it was emotional, it was all the things, it was perfect. Everyone has raved about this. You don't need to hear me talk about it more, but it is one of my favorites of the year. And finally, we are at my top 3 books of 2022, and these are going to be ranked in order. So my number 3 book of the year is One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle. I absolutely loved this one. It is a magical realism book that follows a young woman who just experienced the death of her mother. She had this elaborate trip planned out with her and her mom. They were going to go to Italy, to Positano, and like relive this amazing trip that her mom had when she was in her 20s. But then obviously she dies and she can't make it. So our main character just decides to go by herself, and while she's there, she runs into the 20s version of her mom when she took this trip originally. So she's getting to know her mom as a young person in a different phase of her life, uncovering family secrets, parsing through generational trauma. All of these emotions are coming up. She's rethinking her own life and her own relationships back home. It's very emotional, very fast-paced in that way, but it's also extremely atmospheric. Like, I could have just read this book on the vibes alone. It feels like you're taking an Italian vacation. Just like the chapters when it just describes her day, like walking to a cafe and having a little Aperol spritz and then smelling the lemons scented by the lemon tree on the patio, and the descriptions of how everything looks and tastes and smells. Oh, it's just visceral. It's just gorgeous. You just feel like you're in this place, and you add all the emotion on top of it, plus that little magical realism element that y'all know I love. Chef's kiss, perfect. My number 2 book of the year is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. And this is another one that I'm going to preface with, it's dark. There are a lot of trigger warnings. Just be aware of that. If you don't like this book because it's dark and you were triggered by it, please don't leave it a bad review because it is just not for you. Because this book is simply gorgeous and simply perfect, and nobody is going to fight me on that. Like, I will actually go to war for this book. This is a story that needed to be told. It is strong feminist commentary in a super dark and gory, twisty thriller. It kind of focuses on the intersection where, like, the people who are on the front lines fighting for feminism meet your average housewife. Both of these sectors of women deal with very similar issues. Some are just more overt than others, like the outright misogyny of a rapist believing that he can take power over you versus the more covert misogyny of a husband who just dismisses his wife and believes that she belongs in the kitchen. How even though one is more extreme than the other, they both mean the same thing about how a man thinks about a woman. That kind of level of commentary tackled in a thriller was very ambitious, but Ashley Winstead does it so well. And she frames the story all around this little housewife who is just having a luxurious moment by the pool, painting her nails, listening to a true crime podcast, when suddenly she realizes that the story being told on the podcast is her own. It is the recounting of the alleged suicide of her college roommate, but she has never believed that this was actually a suicide. So she sets out to meet up with this podcast person and reinvestigate, rehash things from the past, and see if they can find out what happened back in the day and what happened now in present day as the story is getting reopened up with another death. It's commentary heavy, it's emotional, it is dark, it is gory, it goes to that extreme place. But I believe that it has to go there to reiterate the gravity of this story and what it's trying to say. The characters are nuanced. Even the podcast guy has this layer of misogyny that is very covert. It just calls out every little thing that men do that puts women on edge. And if you've ever experienced misogyny, which if you're a woman in the world, you have, even if you're in denial about it, you will just feel very seen reading this book. And of course it has feminine energy, feminine rage, good for her vibes. It's really everything that I could want out of a thriller. So obsessed. And a drum roll for my top book of the year, even though many of y'all probably already know what I'm going to say. My top number 1 favorite book of 2022 is Blood Sugar by Sasha Rothschild. And not only is this book gorgeous, look at that cover, but it is everything that I could possibly want from a book. And I knew from reading the synopsis that this was going to be a contender for my best book of the year. I didn't know just how much I would love it, but I knew right away. This is an extremely character-driven thriller about a woman who is a therapist. She is an animal lover. She is an all-around just nerd. So right now it's sounding like me in the flesh. But she's one more thing. She is a murderer. She has killed 3 people. And when her husband dies, even though she didn't kill him, she falls under suspicion. It's very ironic that she got away with 3 murders. And then finally, when someone around her dies that wasn't her fault, she's brought in for questioning. And she kind of has to talk her way out of it without the police finding out that she actually did kill people. We go on this ride with her as we're recounting all these events from her life that led to her being the way that she is. She is one of the most complex and nuanced characters I've ever read about. I related to her so much, obviously not in the murdering way, but the fact that she is a therapist. We also see a therapist in therapy, which I love that representation. If you're a therapist, you need to be in therapy. So we go through her dealing with that in present day and what happened throughout her whole life with the murders that she committed, how she became the way that she is. Again, it's just super character driven. It's all about this woman and who she is. It is twisty, it is shocking, but not in a traditional thriller way. More in wow, I could not believe that this character has another layer, and then another layer, and another layer that is revealed over and over and over. It's emotional, it has commentary, it is dark, it is kind of funny, it is kind of campy, it has a lot to say. Basically, all of that put together is a recipe for my best book of the year, and this book met that. Also, it is the perfect summery setting. It's set in Miami, and the vibes were just immaculate. I read it as I was baking in the sun out by the pool, and it was the perfect way to take in this book. I'm so obsessed with it. I want to reread it so bad. It is just chef's kiss amazing, so good. So that is going to be it for my top 22 books of 2022. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your favorite book of 2022 down below in the comments. And thank you so much for watching and following along with my Vlogmas series. I hope you enjoyed all 25 of these videos that I've created for you guys this month. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week, and I will see you guys in the new year. Bye!